And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. And please welcome JD Slajchert, who wrote this book, Darling, You're Not Alone. And it's actually a phenomenal book, but there's a lot more behind why he wrote his second novel. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Deborah, it's a pleasure, such a pleasure to be here. You're such a veteran broadcaster and journalist, and I feel very honored to be speaking with you today. So thank you so much for having me.
Honestly, I'm honored to be speaking to you because you've done an awful lot in your, few years that you've graduated from college. You are also the director of development for the Luke Bodden Foundation. You are also a national ambassador for the American Red Cross. You've written a screenplay, Happy at You. And a lot of this sort of happened, shall we say, a little unexpectedly. So let's go back a little bit to you playing basketball at a D1 level school at UC Santa Barbara. Let's take it back to that and talk about you playing basketball. And there's a young person that you met who changed your life. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And unexpected is absolutely the word I would use to describe sort of what my last, few years out of college have been like. And I can speak for my family and friends when they agree with that. Growing up, I was sort of the stereotypical loud redhead athlete who was, just sort of concerned with how I could play basketball. And school really did come second to me. And I think a lot of kids can relate to that. I think growing up, sports ends up sort of dominating a lot of our youths, and I was no different. But while I was playing in high school, there was this little boy named Luke Bodden who, when he was only 6 years old, went up to his little sister his older sister, and asked her if she would, organize a meet for us while I was in high school. And so this girl who I'd never met before came up to me and said, "Hey, my little brother is your biggest fan, and he wants to meet you and play basketball with you." And I was sort of looking at her like, sure, I'll get around to it when I can. And
Ooh,
she said it
yeah.
actually has to happen next week. And I asked her why, and that was when she told me that her little brother is 6 years old, and the last thing that he wanted to do before he went into the hospital for a full year of isolation for a bone marrow transplant was meet me and play basketball with me. And I was 17 years old, as I said at the time, and Luke Bodden was only 6. And that was when he and I met, and that ended up being really the friendship that changed my life. Because I started. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Why did he need a bone marrow transplant? Can you tell us?
Yeah. So Luke, at the time, I was very naive to that, and that's actually a big part of my story, and I'm happy to explain that too and talk further. But he had something called sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease, for those of you maybe listening that don't know, is a 95% African American disorder, genetic illness that people are born with, and the only known cure for sickle cell disease is a bone marrow transplant. So Luke was suffering from this affliction that he was, as I said, born with, and he finally had a match for someone that could donate their bone marrow to him to have this transplant. But what happens when you do that is your immune system is brought to like a screeching halt, where any sort of even mild illness can be deadly. So you go into isolation for a full 12 months while you're going through this process to let the marrow take to the recipient. And that was why Luke had to go into the hospital for that long, and he couldn't even leave his hospital room from the age he was 6 to the age he was 7.
Oh, so then what happened? You met with him, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I ended up meeting him playing basketball with Luke, and he had this sort of snappy personality where he was like talking trash to me and telling me how, even though I was so much bigger than him, how he could still beat me in one-on-one. And he was like a glowing light, and had this kind of wisdom much further beyond his years. I think this is a really perfect part of my story to speak about with you, Deborah. Is, to be honest, I really felt like after I'd played basketball with him, my deed was done. Like, I'd met this little boy, and he was going to the hospital and I was going back to high school and back to my, cozy little world. And that would be it. And, I think that it's a really interesting thing. What happened next was, 6 months later, I got the call from my dream school, UC Santa Barbara, saying, "Hey, JD, we got a spot for you to come and play basketball here." And I was, with my family and so excited. And for whatever reason, I immediately thought of Luke and wanted to share this update with him. Just being that he was so supportive of me. So I called up his family, and he was staying, obviously you're an LA native yourself. He was staying in Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, and I was living in Thousand Oaks. And I knew also that UC Santa Barbara was only about a 2-hour drive. So I wanted to share with him the news I'd be staying, close to home to play in college. So I wanted to tell him, hey, you need to get better because you got 4 more years of watching me play. So I drove down to CHLA, and I remember, more than anything, one of the first things that happened that day was when I got to Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, and I had to sign in to go and visit him. I went up to the 4th floor, which was the isolation ward. And I remembered walking through that hall, Deborah, and seeing every other room occupied with other little kids, from suffering from leukemia or obviously sickle cell disease like Luke. And it was so earth kind of shattering and moving. And it really grabbed hold of me. It's something I'll never forget. And when I arrived to Luke's room, and this really answers your question about why me and Luke, why did this bond, become really my whole life and lead to all these books and all this change in my life, was when I got to his room that day, I actually could see inside of it before he could see me. And I saw that above his hospital bed, he had a photo of me and him the day we met and played basketball together. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I sort of made a vow to myself that I said, you know what, no matter what else I do in my life, I'm going to be there for this little kid as much time as he has. And that was really the moment that stuck with me and told me, I have to do everything I can to be there for him. And the rest is sort of history. But
could you tell us what happened after that?
Yeah, so thankfully Luke made it out of the hospital. His bone marrow transplant was successful, and I gave him a UCSB hat that day, and he ended up never taking it off, and he stayed pretty true to that.
Wow.
And he made it to the next 3 years. We celebrated birthdays together, and we would always eat pizza together after my games. That was his favorite food, and he used to come to all my college games. And but tragically, he started having all these kind of pretty unpredictable medical setbacks. He'd be sick and he'd go into the hospital for 3 weeks and then he'd get out only to become sick again. And he was having all these complications, but I used to still come and visit him. And, we always were hopeful that he would get better, but tragically on September 14th, 2016, at the age of 10 years old, he passed away from a stroke. And, I was 21 at that time, so I'd known him for 4 years, and we'd had 4 years of amazing memories. But it was a total shock to all of us because he was obviously so young, and at this time now he was at UCLA Mattel's Children's Hospital, and it was a really life-changing thing because he was my best friend. He was my biggest fan, and everything I sort of did in my life, I felt like I was doing it to make him proud. And once he was gone, a lot changed for me. So,
do you sometimes ask yourself, why was this little kid the vessel? Why did it have to come through him, right? That my life changed to do this work? Because that must be something that goes through your mind, right? Because things don't just things don't just happen, right? There must be a reason. Do you come up with an answer to yourself, or it just is?
Well, I'll tell you this. Obviously, I'm on your show today, and we're talking about Luke, and he's still very alive, even in this moment with us and your listeners. But, I was even speaking with a good friend this morning who plays in the NBA, Gabe Vincent for the Miami Heat, and he was my teammate in college, and he was very close with Luke. And Luke inspired him and always believed in him. And Luke met Gabe through me, and I could tell you stories on stories about the people that Luke Bodden inspired, not just me, but hundreds and hundreds of people that are out, I feel like changing the world even to this day. And, his family would go on to found the Luke Strong Foundation, which you mentioned is a nonprofit I'm a part of that helps children with sickle cell disease. And I was speaking with Luke's mom yesterday. I speak with her almost every day. And
wow.
we're still helping kids all over the country. We just partnered with Children's Hospital in Dallas and are giving, holiday donations to them. So yeah, this is a very much alive part of our lives. Even 6 years after he's passed away, we're still finding ways to give back to other kids because sickle cell disease is such a prominent illness and not enough people know about it. So I spent a lot of my time trying to educate people on, the illness that took my best friend at the age of 10.
So you do a lot of speaking, right? What do you speak? I know that you've also spoken at UC Santa Barbara, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you speak to people about sometimes? Because to me, when I hear about your story, and I've talked to you also off camera, this wasn't a coincidence, if you will. It was almost, it was meant for you to continue this life's work, right? And you decided to take hold of this relationship that you had with this beautiful boy and do something about it and with it. And certainly when you were at your prime in high school, you weren't thinking about this, and in college, right? This changed the direction of your life. So could you speak to people in our audience about that, about how something can happen in your life to change the entire direction so that you're speaking to others about giving back and all that? And by the way, we will get to your books, I promise.
No, yeah, no problem. This is very important stuff.
Yeah.
So I've no problem spending quite a bit of time on this side of my life and my career. Because yeah, I would say that the advice I give, and a part of what I do speak about, Deborah, is I always say, probably too much, but is keep your ear to the ground. You really don't know when inspiration is going to strike, and that person's going to walk into your life that ends up changing everything. And obviously for me, I'd say it's pretty clear Luke was that person. But I think, and not to give myself too much credit, but I do think you have to put yourself in situations where you can open yourself up to that. Like I do find a lot of what I speak about is you can't reserve yourself from the world, because opportunities are going to come by every day where if you don't, maybe look up from your cell phone while you're ordering your coffee every morning and interact with the person serving it to you, or if you get invited to something that maybe is a little outside of your comfort zone, but you say, what, I really think that person's great, I want to support them in their pursuit. I think it's just living that sort of yes man or yes woman mentality of being open to people and new things. And sometimes you're going to get let down and it's going to turn out to be nothing, but sometimes it's going to lead to something pretty incredible. And I think Luke for me has been a prime example of how I had no idea what that basketball game would mean to me, but here I am almost 10, 12 years later, still talking about it almost every day. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Incredible young man you are. So you've written 2 books. Moonflower was your first novel, and this one, which is terrific, Darling, You're Not Alone. I'd like to say that the New York Times certainly had a lot to say about it. They're a big believer in the book. You've gotten terrific reviews. Would you tell our audience briefly what the book is about, what it's based on?
Yeah, for sure. And the book was just came out a few weeks ago, so I've been on the press junket for quite some time. And it's been a lot of fun talking about this book. But Darling, You're Not Alone is a fictional novel that I spent the last 3 years writing. And the story is about a young boy named Phoenix Ivor, who is 15 years old for the most part of the book. And Phoenix is someone who is living in Darling, Colorado in the year 1999. And he's someone that suffers from sort of like a social anxiety and depression, and kind of has this sort of like gloomy outlook on the world, despite all the things he's seen and been through. He just can't seem to believe in something more is out there. But he has this incredible friendship with his father named Herman, who is the security guard at Darling High School, where Phoenix is entering his freshman year. And Herman is sort of the only one that can really get through to Phoenix and communicate with him in a way that he understands and is comfortable with, being that he kind of, as I said, suffers from this social anxiety. But Phoenix and Herman walk to school together every day, and Herman is this sort of like glass half full, always positive character in Phoenix's life. And this is all very early on in the story when Phoenix discovers that there's something mysterious about his father's past, where he used to be a police officer and now he isn't any longer, and he doesn't really know why. So the mystery is Phoenix is trying to figure out what happened to his dad when suddenly Phoenix walks into the library at Darling High School one morning, and two students, instead of holding books, are holding handguns, walk in right behind him. And Darling, Colorado becomes the epicenter of the worst school shooting in U.S. history. And all of the people we meet and interact with, Herman, Phoenix, are forced to sort of deal with this very real tragedy that is going on in our world today, outside of even this book. And the rest of the story from there, I'll leave for readers to go ahead and check out. But it's how does Phoenix move on from such a catastrophic event, despite having this sort of gloomy feel about the world before that, and then after dealing with this, how does he move on? How does the town of Darling move on? So Darling, You're Not Alone is this story about overcoming extreme adversity in the face of a school shooting, and it's one that I think is a very heavy read, but also one that I think is a very positive and hopeful one, in being that this YA novel approaches a really controversial and important topic of gun violence.
It's actually a stunning read, and I would hope that it would be in schools too, because the way it was handled was so beautifully done. And as I know more about you, right, I could see sprinkles of you and your life throughout this book as well. It doesn't matter if it's about overcoming something, anxiety, whatever, right? We always put a little bit of ourselves into what we write, don't we?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that I've often said that I'm never one character in a book I write, but I'm a little bit of each of them. Like I'm not someone who can wholly relate to Phoenix and his struggles as a 15-year-old. Wow, are there certain parts of him that I really obviously feel passionately similarly with him. There's also parts of Herman, as I mentioned, and then there's characters that like Shay is his sort of love interest in this girl that he grew up with and had this incredible bond with, sort of platonically. And I feel like I've had some amazing friends just like that too. So yeah, there's a lot of each character has sort of got bits and pieces of who I am, but I so appreciate you taking the time to read it and give that praise, Deborah. That means quite a bit.
Yeah. What would you like our audience to know about you? I know that you love to play pickup basketball. You listen to Frank Ocean, right? You've got some big dreams, like climbing where? Where do you want to
Mount
climb?
Everest. Yeah. Mount Everest. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Why do I get the feeling that you're going to do that? I also read that you would love to live, not quite here, but what would be a dream place for you to live?
Paris, for sure. I mean, maybe that's cliche of me, but some of my favorite authors are expatriates: Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, John Dos Passos, the whole, like, on the Lost Generation. I'm a big fan of all of their work, and I want to sort of follow in the writers that came before me and spend at least a couple of years in Paris. Maybe not full time, but yeah, I want to be there.
Yeah, I get the feeling that you will be there. There's no doubt about it. Not following in their footsteps, but sort of walking in your own. I really do. Anything you'd like to tell our audience before we let you go? What are you working on now? Are you working on your climbing? I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah, right. I think if I may, before I get to sort of what I'm working on today, I just would like to send a sort of a brief message or overview on everything we discussed today, just to anyone listening out there. I always just let people know, like, pretty simply, you're not alone. If anybody's out there is going through a tough time or maybe suffering through something that maybe they haven't shared with anybody and they keep it completely internalized, don't forget that you're not alone in this world. You're not alone in what you're going through. and it's okay to have dealt with pain and grief. And I've lost good friends, but I've also feel like I've had incredible support systems around me. My family, my friends, and make sure you open yourself up and find people to speak with. And hopefully, what we discussed today and some of the books I have can be some sort of light in this darkness. That's sort of what I attempt to put into these projects. But currently, I have the beginnings of a third novel that I'm sort of slowly creeping back into as Darling gets out into the world and, has the legs of its own now. It's sort of its own life. And so I have, plans for that book to be released hopefully soon. And then I also have a trilogy project of 3 different books that I'm currently working on as well. And, with the state of both of them are in very different places. So it's hard for me to know which will be released first, but those are the two new projects I'm working on. So,
and of course the foundation, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That is something that will be a part of my life going forward forever. That never stops. We're always doing fundraising, and I'm always doing speaking for that. So yeah, the nonprofit work is a big part of my life, and no matter where my writing takes me, that will always be a part of it.
Yeah, I've so enjoyed talking to you and meeting you face to face, if you will, because it really hits home, just the kind of person that you are and how one incident has impacted your life, probably forever, really. Just sort of changed the direction of probably where you thought you'd be going and probably doing more magnificent things. And you may have even thought you were going to do when you were a 17-year-old kid, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And it was so lovely to meet you and be on your wonderful show. As I said, you're a veteran in this business, and it means a lot that you're taking the time to speak with someone like me. But I've enjoyed every moment of it, and well said. I mean, Luke really has shaped and was the catalyst for my journey, and I'll never forget him and what he meant to me. And I try to share his story with as many people as I can for that reason.
Yeah. And please, everybody, pick up the book, Darling, You Are Not Alone. Also, look up your website. You want to give a shout out to your website and any social media that you want people to find you on?
Yeah, for sure. So you can get the book on Amazon, and also as of last night, you can get the book on Barnes & Noble. So that was a big step for us to have that availability. So yeah, appreciate it. That was pretty cool to see. And you can also get it on my personal website where there's links to both of those, and that's www.jdwritesbooks.com. There's also a website for the book where you can find out more information on the project and a kind of a little bit more behind the scenes on that, darlingyou'renotalone.com. Also, summerhousepublishing.co. And then you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at JD_Slajchert.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for joining us, JD. I've really enjoyed it. And you can find our interview with JD Slajchert on my YouTube, on my Facebook and Instagram, and then on an audio version, we'll transfer it over to iHeartRadio, to Apple Podcasts, to Amazon, Spotify. I don't know, just about everywhere you get your audio and video podcasts. Put in our name, and you'll find our interview. So please pass it along to your friends as well. Thanks again for joining us. Please give our best also to Luke's family. Please let them know that we're thinking of them. We really are. And we'll also put information about the foundation as well into our text when we write about this. So thank you. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us on Deborah Kobylt Live. I'm your host, Deborah Zara Kobylt, and have a good day. See you soon, and happy holidays.